Who pays the most taxes? I mean, it's a question that sparks so much debate, right? But what if we just set aside the arguments and followed the money, according to the government's own data? Well, in this explainer, we're going to dig into a report that does exactly that, to see who really foots the bill in the U.S.
So much of the whole tax debate really just boils down to this one idea, that the wealthiest people among us aren't paying their fair share. It's a really powerful belief, and according to the report we're breaking down, it's pretty much the driving force behind all the calls to raise taxes on the nation's top earners.
But the report we're looking at here kind of asks us to hit pause on that whole idea. It argues that when you look directly at the official IRS data, well, the numbers start to tell a very different story. All right, so let's get right to the heart of the report's argument. It really all comes down to a single statistic. And honestly, for a lot of people, it's a pretty surprising one. And there it is, 45.8%. Yeah, that's a big number, just kind of sitting there. But what is it? I mean, what does this one number actually represent when you're talking about the entire U.S. tax system? Okay, so here's what that number means. According to this report's analysis of IRS data, the top 1% of earners paid 45.8%. That's nearly half of all federal income taxes in the country. Now, it's super important to remember, we're talking specifically about federal income tax here, not all the other stuff like payroll or state or sales taxes. But for this one massive bucket of money, the data shows a single slice of the population shouldering almost half the entire burden.
Okay, so that's the big headline number. But how does the math actually shake out? To really get the full picture, we've got to dissect the data the report is using to back all this up.
This is where you really start to see the difference in the rates. The report points out that the top 1%, they paid an average federal income tax rate of over 26%. Now let's compare that to the bottom half of all earners. They paid an average rate of just 3.7%. According to this data, that's a rate nearly 7 times higher for the top group.
And it's not just about the rates, it's about the actual raw dollar amounts. I mean, look at this chart. The top 1% paid a whopping $864 billion in income taxes. But here's what's truly staggering. That one group, just the top 1%, contributed more in total taxes than the entire bottom 90% of the population combined. That's wow. This table really puts it all into perspective. Just look at how the tax burden gets more and more concentrated as you move up that income ladder. The top 5%, they're paying 2/3 of the total. The top 10%, over 3/4. But the number that just blows my mind is that last one. The top half of all earners pay a staggering 97.7% of all federal income taxes, almost the whole pie. So if these top earners are paying so much, who are they, really? Well, the report argues that to get the full story, we can't just stare at percentages. We have to look at this huge and honestly often overlooked engine of the economy that a lot of them own, the family business.
And here's a really key detail from the report. The vast majority of these businesses, and remember, they're the country's biggest private employer, they aren't set up like your typical big corporations. No, they're structured in the special way that totally changes how their profits get taxed.
So what does pass-through entity even mean? Well, think of it like this. Instead of the business itself paying corporate taxes, all the profits pass through directly to the owners. Then they report that business income on their personal tax returns, right alongside their salary. This means the profits from the business get taxed at individual income tax rates.
Okay, so to help these businesses out, the tax code has this special provision called the Section 99A deduction. The report explains it pretty simply. Say an owner is in that top 37% tax bracket. They get to deduct 20% of their business income. So, as you can see, that effectively drops their tax rate on that specific income all the way down to 29.6%. That's a lot closer to the rate that the big corporations pay.
All right, so after laying out all this data, you've got the high concentration of taxes paid by the top earners and these special tax structures for the businesses they often own. The report wraps up by framing the central challenge that this creates for lawmakers.
So here's the report's bottom line. The data, as they see it, points to a highly progressive system where the tax burden is really focused on the top. I mean, with the top half of earners already paying nearly 98% of all income tax, the report basically concludes that lawmakers are stuck in a tough spot. Where can they possibly find new revenue without just going back to that same small group of taxpayers over and over again?
And so here we are, right back where we started, but maybe with a bit of a new perspective. When the data shows that a really small group pays a huge share of the total, it forces us to ask that fundamental question again. What does a fair share truly mean?